everyone, happy Wednesday. It's Alysia here, and I'm super excited to be joined by Meyers, my partner at Street Global Venture Capital, for this inspiring edition of our bi-weekly Entrepreneur Wednesdays Fireside Chat. Today, I'd love to welcome you to our discussion of robotics, a once arcane, scientific, and specialized industrial discipline that is now supporting our everyday experiences and, of course, reshaping industries we'd expect, such as natural resource extraction, manufacturing, transportation, and commerce, and some we might not, such as healthcare. Robotic technology is ever present and also perhaps not as visible as we would anticipate, a thought that, along with many others today, we'll be exploring further. The topic of robotics also builds upon and goes hand in hand with last Wednesday's discussion on artificial intelligence, software design reshaping the programming side of robotics by increasing robotic perception, learning, and automation. One thing we all know for certain, robotics are going to fundamentally change business and society as we know it, and that's why we're highlighting it today as the topic of our global online fireside chat. Whether we're in business or politics, it's a topic we all need to understand better to ultimately create the futures we want. I'm broadcasting to you live from the United Kingdom, home to cutting-edge research into both robotics and AI. As one of the world's top technological research and development centers, we can see amazing things coming out of the UK, and we look forward to sharing them here with you today. For those of you who don't know, our topic for today is Rise of the Robots. What began as science fiction is becoming our new reality. What does the new frontier really look like? Our global panel is superb, and we are super excited to have them join us. So welcome to California-based Seth Wiener, who's a technologist, venture capitalist, and strategist. Georgia-based Randall Foster, who's a venture capitalist, investor, strategic connector, tech entrepreneur, and startup advisor. Welcome to Idaho-based John Gotts, who's a venture capitalist, innovator, cryptocurrency, and token specialist. Welcome to New York-based Scott Amix, who's a TEDx speaker, futurist, author, and venture capitalist. Welcome to Norway-based Rick Salmon, who's an entrepreneur, angel investor, and keynote speaker. Welcome to Canada-based Tariq Ali Ashkar, who's an angel investor and venture capitalist with a passion for blockchain, IoT, AI, and machine learning. And last but definitely not least, welcome to Meyers, my co-host for today. Now, I know you want to hear from the best, and they are here to join us. Why don't we ask them to introduce themselves too? Scott, please go ahead.
All right, great. Thank you very much. My name is Scott Amix, and I'm the managing partner at Amix Ventures, as well as CEO of Amix Plus. I'm with Tribeca as an innovation fellow, and also associated with Singularity University and the Smart City Accelerator. Our focus is really around transforming industries, and particularly for nations and economic zones. So we're very much in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution and all the horizontal capabilities, including robotics and AI.
Super excited to have you join us, Scott. Randall, please say hi to everyone.
Greetings, this is Randall Foster. I'm a general partner with Seraph Group, and we're a nationwide early stage VC that leverages the power of many, I'll say, and that we have a wide variety of retired and existing executives and exited entrepreneurs as our investors, and provide tremendous deal flow and help to our now 50 portfolio companies. And we invest also disruptive, transformative technologies, everything from semiconductor to autonomous vehicles and asteroid mining to medical devices. So glad to contribute today.
Welcome, very excited you joining us. John, please say hi to everyone.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, my name is John Gotts, and I'm 50 years old, and I've been starting companies since I was 7. This is really all I know, but I do this because I have a terrific passion for it, and it really doesn't matter what industry it is, although I do have a lot of interest in energy startups. But I started Family Office Venture Capital, which is really focused on preservation of wealth, not so much risk. But I've also started Tokens Inc., which Token stands for security tokens, and I think that we're pretty much at the forefront of this crypto technology, but making all these trades and all these tokens legal as either securities or commodities. And we're working with the SEC and CFTC and staying within their lines. And so that and the Tokens and Exchange self-regulating body is a police force that's essentially looking for bad actors and reporting them. So that is what we do.
Welcome, John. Very excited to have you join us. Seth is back. Seth, please say hi to everyone.
Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, Alyssa. My name is Seth Wiener. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I have a background in investment banking as well as founding a few companies myself. And my fund right now is focused on the intersection of IoT and the cloud. And we really think that's the most exciting place to be because it's one of these areas where you get to see a little bit of everything, from crypto companies, blockchain companies, to companies doing robotics to autonomous cars, which we're working a lot with right now. And I think really where this is going to be headed in the future is just one of the most, in my life, being able to see everything from personal computing to where we're all on our iPhones today. I guess the sky's the limit. But thanks for having me, Alysia.
Very excited to have you join us. Rick, say hi to everyone, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rick Salmon, and I'm located in Oslo, Norway, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. And I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I've worked for many years both as an executive coach and as well as a lecturer for the BP, the Thunder School of Global Management, and a number of big organizations like that. I worked with the European Space Agency for going on about 7 years now. And my specialty is working with voice and working with voice analysis. And we're seeing how much voice is becoming part of this machine learning and robotics environment. And I'm looking forward to talking to everyone about that today. So thank you very much.
Welcome, Rick. And last but definitely not least, Tariq from Canada. Please say hi.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tariq. I am from Toronto. I'm CEO of Emerging Star Investments. My background experience is in economics, human development, entrepreneurship. Currently, we are creating one of the AIS artificial intelligence systems on analyzing funds, matching to the people. My passion basically is also in crypto assets valuation, which is a growing market. And we are hoping to put together a system through our own investment funds on the valuation of crypto assets. I'm very excited to learn from everybody and contribute as well more on the crypto side of things. Thank you.
Welcome, Tariq. And last but definitely not least, my co-host for today, Christian. Please say hi to everyone.
Thank you, Alysia. My name is Christian Meyers. I'm a San Francisco-based technology investor, investing as a partner of Alysia's in companies that are reshaping industries with technology and solving some of the world's biggest challenges in areas such as healthcare and financial access. I am very excited about today's topic because it's one that's reshaping everyone's lives faster than we realize. And I'm excited to learn from this great group of diverse experts. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Christian. Now, we've just got a few shout outs before we jump into our questions for our VIPs. On the screen are contact details for our VIPs. Feel free to reach out to them. You know we love hearing from you. You could always find us at inspireme@onlinefiresidechat.com, and we'll always do our best to make sure your questions get answered. Just a reminder, we have community champions and ever-growing meetup groups in over 80 cities in 60 countries around the globe, including in North and South America, the UK, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, India, Asia, and Australia. As you all know by now, if you'd like to meet up with one of your local chapters or you'd like to start your own, make sure to email us and we'll do our very best to put you in contact with them. On that note, thank you to all our champions from around the globe. You do this voluntarily and we're incredibly grateful to you. You are the heart and soul of our community and we wouldn't be here today without you. Over the next few months, with all our help, our aim is to share with and inspire entrepreneurs in more than 100 countries. Together, we know we can make this happen. Thank you again to our VIP guests for joining us today and for sharing your incredible knowledge so generously with us. Thank you to our growing family of supporters and collaborators from around the developing world for once again hosting sessions for hundreds of entrepreneurs who don't have access to necessary bandwidth or understanding of the English language to join our sessions on their own. Thank you to all the presidents, prime ministers, ministers, members of parliament, ambassadors, government ministries, UN officers, World Economic Forum, US Embassy Corners, British Council offices, university campuses, schools, business incubators, Chamber of Commerces, and community centers and community radio stations for all your weekly hosting support and for raising awareness within your regions. And of course, thank you to our UN Women team for all the support you show us. We're streaming across some new live platforms once again today. If you'd like to share us with your community, make sure to tell us that you have a radio station near you that you want to broadcast our fireside chats from. Now you want to learn from the best, and they are here. So our topic for today is the rise of the robots. What began as science fiction is becoming our new reality. What does the new frontier really look like? And our VIPs are the best in the business, so we're going to have some serious fun today. Just to make our VIPs feel super comfortable, we're going to pose the question to one of you. It goes to all of you. We're here to learn, so no holds barred. Please tell us the good, bad, and ugly. and we are super excited to have you join us. So our first question goes to Seth, and then of course we'd like to hear from Randall as well. So the question goes as follows, Seth. You are on the hot seat. Seth, in your opinion, what is a machine and what is a robot? Please go for it.
Wow, well, that's a great way to start. Thanks, Alysia. Well, I think a machine and a robot is a machine to begin with, and the difference really has to lie in what kind of programming and what kind of intelligence you're putting in to the device that you're now going to be calling a robot. So a robot starts as a machine when you start to program more knowledge base into it and abilities to where it can start to do tasks other than just one function. I think that's really how you can clearly delineate the two. Whether that's going to be how someone else interprets it or not, I guess it's really each to his own. But in my mind, and sort of the mind of my team, I think we really look at how things are going to differentiate themselves by being able to be programmed and taking on other tasks, not just doing one specific function.
Fantastic way to start today's show. Thank you, Seth. Randall, we'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of the difference between a machine and a robot. Please go ahead.
Sure, I'll add a little bit even to that. And then when I think robot, I start thinking movement. And there's the addition, as previous speaker meant, about the ability to reprogram or repurpose. And now when you blend in the AI capabilities and ability to digest information, make decisions, and apply that to movement, you get all kinds of new capabilities that a basic machine with a singular function can't do.
Thank you. Fascinating insights being shared today. Our next question, we'd love to hear from John, Scott, and then for our community, Christian, we'd love to hear what you have to say. So John, we're putting you on the hot seat this time. Please make yourself nice and comfortable. In your opinion, what important concept should be kept in mind when we think about robots, John? Please go ahead.
Well, I guess displacement of human workforce, right? Because there are so many people, especially if you're a capitalist like myself, that don't think that this human utopia where we pass out free money, that sounds like communism or socialism here in the States, frowned upon. But what are we going to do? When I think of machine versus robot, I think a machine is something that doesn't have code, because my father's been programming since '68. And when I ask him to build something, he's essentially building a robot that's going to carry out a task that makes that machine now a smart machine, puts a brain in it. But when we put brains, for instance, into autonomous vehicles, next, that's the big thing. That's a robot, and it's running this truck. But trucks currently have living wage jobs, more so for each state in the United States than any other industry, actually. And so when you've replaced the assembly line, you can now replace lawyers and paralegals and chatbots. And now you're going to replace truckers too, and you're going to replace taxi drivers and Ubers. There's going to be a point where robots have all the jobs. And so I think that's something we have to keep in mind.
Thank you, Rick and Scott. Given you travel around the world and you talk on this topic, please share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, so this is Scott Amick speaking. So I think the question that we need to be asking isn't so much whether machines or robots are going to take over our jobs, but rather, how are we going to work together to increase productivity? Some of the slides that I shared recently on my global travel is around the innovation gap, where there is a significant increase in productivity from automation, and particularly cognitive-enabled robotics. However, our human productivity has been fairly low or stagnant. The question then becomes, how do we start to combine and leverage some of these capabilities so that human plus machine performance and productivity increases? The example that I would give for kind of a colloquial sense is that if you think about computers, and some of you may have seen the movie Hidden Figures as an example. In that movie, the human computers were very concerned about the entrance of IBM mainframes. But if you remember the storyline, there was actually one supervisor, rather than fearing the onslaught of these machines, she decided to learn Fortran programming. And then more so, she then disseminated that knowledge to her cohorts, who were then indispensable, because machines cannot fully operate on their own. They need to work together with humans. More importantly, the scope of AI and robotics is fairly limited. if you speak with CSAIL, MIT, or people that are behind the likes of DeepStack or AlphaGo, they'll tell you that the parameters by which they won or beat human capabilities was very, very tight and constrained. We are at a point where it's about human and machine versus each other. We're still very far away from reaching singularity, regardless of the forecasts of 2029 or 2049. More realistically, I would say it's close to more like 50 to 100 years, based on the more, I would say, the median between the AI scientists.
Thank you, Scott. Fascinating insights being shared today. Christian, would you like to summarize some of these incredible insights being shared today by our VIPs before we move on to our next question?
Thank you, Alysia. Well, I love the strong start we're off to here. One of the things I think about when I think about robots is that what's a machine and what's a robot. And for me, a robot is a machine that can perform a complex series of actions that, as a panelist said, can do that with the help of programming and even perceive, interpret, and act based on their environment. Another important aspect of robotics is whether they are semi-autonomous or autonomous. And then in terms of important concepts, as was said, robotics is unleashing a new wave of productivity, and what we do with the wealth that's created by that productivity will be an important question. And it's probably a question we're not even investing enough time in today. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Moving on to our next question. We're posing this one to Tariq and Rick. Of course, we'd love to hear from our other VIPs as well. So Tariq, in your opinion, what industries or activities do you see robots operating that people may not be aware of or may actually find very surprising? Please go ahead, Tariq.
Yes, I think some of the industries in which there is going to be a future trend for robotics is, of course, which carry a lot of hazards. So mining, for example, is a very hazardous activity, and the rise of robots there are going to be very important. Now, drones is another form of robots, which is also becoming, moving in very disruptive areas. So for example, I was reading that Amazon is starting to build some drones for shopping, because as urbanization increases, a lot of traffic congestions. So people might be using drones for their shopping or getting groceries or other stuff. Also, I believe in this discussion, it was very important that we have to analyze robots and their application in the whole business model, not only in the business model for the return on investment or profitability of the companies, but also holistically with what the human elements are also involved and how does it impact society ultimately, given the fact that you can't replace human beings and the human intelligence with artificial intelligence, because that would not only have a negative impact on the economy and the development. So everything has to be balanced out in a way that we leverage the true productivity of robots. At the same time, we also have the corporate and social responsibility to create a positive impact on the society.
Think you, Tariq. Rick, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this question as well. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good comments, Tariq. I think that we normally think about robots. We tend to think about these creatures that have arms and legs and move things around. And yet I think we're going to see an amazing and surprising number of robots that work behind the scenes and help us to do rather unusual things. In my own experience, what happened with me was interesting, was because I work as an executive coach, and I work together with senior people to help them prepare, for example, a speech or a presentation. And my specialty is voice. So I got really good at listening to someone's voice and then being able to mirror back or feedback what I'm hearing. And that was the value of the coaching. But I'm a human and I can only follow 2 or 3 different voice characteristics at a time. And I'm also very subjective in my comments. So I started looking at how could machines listen to a wide range of voice characteristics and monitor them really closely and be able to anticipate how, for example, an audience is likely to respond. And this has led me into a robotics with voice analysis that I think is going to change significantly how we do things like tech support, how we deal with people when we're speaking and so forth. So I think it's a fascinating addition to what we're looking at in robotics when we can start talking about human behavior being affected by this.
Thank you so much, Rick. Moving on to our next question, and we'd love to pose this question, first of all, to Seth. Seth, in your opinion, what things ultimately constrain the prevalence of robots in our world?
Yeah, that is a great question. And thanks again, Alysia. I think some of the things that are going to constrain robots in this world are really humans. And ultimately, it's true. Ultimately, we're the ones designing them. We're the ones that are programming them. By 2045, I think I just read something yesterday that, AI is going to actually overtake humans in terms of the intelligence level and the functionality of what they're able to do. So, this goes back to one of the earlier comments, which I thought was really well put. And it goes to, and I think it was from you, Scott, and it really actually comes to how are we going to be able to drive or derive what we're going to allow these robots and machines to do? And I really think that's just going to have to come down to basically coming up with some intelligent policy as humans to decide what the humans are going to now be doing within new roles and new jobs. It's not about displacing humans. It's about reimagining what humans are going to be doing and what machines and robots are going to be doing. And I think when you take a big, look at the big picture and are a little bit more pragmatic, we're using these things now, these machines and these devices, and it's fun to call them things still because we just don't know what half of these things are going to be, but we're using them for our advantage to really improve our lives, not to take away from it. So I would think it's really human that has to decide what we need to do with these machines.
Thank you, Randall. Seth, Randall, we'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of what constrains the prevalence of robots in our world. Please go ahead, Randall.
Sure. When I look at robots at a practical level, I think about power sources, sensors, in raw scale. I'm very intrigued with the potential for robots to be at a micro or even molecular level, and of course there's going to be constraints on how those move and how those operate. And I think as we're able to slowly scale more and more things down, the tremendous advantages will be had.
Thank you, Randall. John, we definitely want to hear from you here. What things constrain the prevalence of robots in our world? Please go ahead.
Well, I still think that it has to do with jobs. I mean, and I know that Elon Musk and others are coming out and saying, watch out for robots. And we're not on AI. We're not so much talking about that. But I come back to, I think that the thing that constrains it is perhaps acceptance in the marketplace that we are going to be replaced. I came from Michigan, where when I grew up, if you didn't have a job, you were a bum. There were jobs for everybody, from AC Delco radio to the line at Fisher Body to putting on the body at Oldsmobile. I mean, everybody had a job. And when those all got shipped away, that wasn't robots. When they got shipped away, that became just like a ghost town. And there's potholes in the streets and houses were being torn down, many on one city block, leaving maybe 3 or 4 where there used to be 30 homes because the rest were rat infested and falling apart. What happened? Well, robots, you're never going to get the jobs back. Trump says he wants to bring the jobs back. Not likely. Robots will take them first. And so the more we put robots into place, I think we really have to figure out what's going to happen to the humans. And I understand someone said, oh yeah, but we'll need people to run those robots. Yeah, right. But there used to be 100 people on the planet. Now I need 2 people pushing buttons. What happened to the other 98? Who have families, who want to send their kids to college, etc. And so I think the restraint, I think the thing that's going to constrain adoption of robots might just be pushback on job loss. I still don't see how we're going to replace all those jobs with robots being so efficient.
Thank you, John. Christian, we'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of what Seth, Randall, and John have been saying around this question. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Alysia. Well, we started out with a question about surprising areas where robotic technology is being applied, and some of the interesting areas I've seen here in Silicon Valley are robotics being used in healthcare and used for things such as surgery, as well as people have commented, robotics has great applications in dangerous situations. And there's some exciting companies developing robots to clean things such as power towers where humans can't safely enter. And along with all of those exciting things, we do have the challenges of policy that takes into account our need to ensure that everyone has resources for living. But then also, as John said, beyond policy, there are big cultural questions, such as how do we as humans replace the meaning that many people derive from having a career or job? And what do we do with the time that's created if robotics unleashes a wave of productivity and creates a big new open set of time for humanity in general? It's a very profound and interesting question. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Moving on to our next question, we'd love to hear from Scott. With respect to financial flow, robotics appears to many investors a very capital intensive business relative to other businesses. In your opinion, do investors see it correctly? And is it more risky than other domains such as software? We'd love to hear from you. Please go ahead, Scott. And then we'd love to hear from Tariq and Rick, of course. Please go ahead, Scott.
Well, I think that's a great question, but let me actually address some of the prior points. I think that's very important. Robotics doesn't work in isolation. It's working with quantum computing. It's working with nanotechnologies. It's working with new energy harvesting, wireless power transfer. It's all of those things that start to eradicate or mitigate some of the risk and constraints of today's robotic build. And so that's one piece. And it is getting very much at the nanoscale, at the graphene level, at the atomic and subatomic and particle levels. Now, in terms of the policy question that's being raised, it is a legitimate question. It is a question that needs to be thoughtfully and I think needs long-term debate. Now, with that said, there is, for the audience, it's very important to decipher the difference between task versus a holistic job. Robots do not or cannot replace holistic jobs as people. Let's say you're a financial analyst. There may be certain things that from a transactional computation that computers or robots can do better, but it is not holistic. And that's the thing that I think it's important to call out. The other piece of it is not a zero-sum game. It is very much of transitioning and innovating, and the policy and the incentives have to be in place to retrain. All of us have to become continuous lifetime learners and adapt, which means that the future of humanity is that of empathy model, which is my second book, is that the people that are displaced, the former drivers, the former machinists, they're going to be serving other humans in a empathetic fashion that typical machines with primary emotion recognition may not be able to do. And that is really where the future of humanity is going. The other topic that has not yet been fully explicitly called out, but that's important, is called machine ethics, machine morality. That's an important topic that needs to be discussed. And there is intellectual debate and discussion, but also capital and research that's going into this area so that we are very much stewarding the process in a responsible fashion.
Thank you, Scott. Tariq, we'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of this. Please go ahead.
Could I ask Scott a question, though? Could I just interject? I apologize, but
is that John?
I'm just curious. Yeah, it's John. Sorry. Scott, you said that empathetic roles won't be taken by computers, or rather, I should say by AI and that. But I just wonder, because, for instance, Rick is talking about having his company Voicable does voice analysis on speakers. And he's ultimately trying to train AI and robots. And we know already that there was an attorney who was actually an AI robot that was responding to people in a chat bot. But what happens when Siri's voice can be empathetically made by AI to actually come across as caring?
Thank you, John. We'll definitely come back to you. We're just running out of time, but we'll definitely come back to that question. Fascinating question. Tariq, going back to the question we posed to Scott, we'd love to hear your insights before we ask Rick. Please go ahead, Tariq, and then we'll definitely come back to John's question as well.
Sure. Thanks, Alysia. One quick comment I would like to make on the constraints in robotics. Based on my experience in the emerging economies, I think there is still a lot of shortage of artificial intelligence, nanotechnologies, and all those technologies, which would really ramp up the production of robotics also because of the brain drain. So that is one comment which I'm making. Coming to your question, what I think is, as an investor or as a venture capitalist firm, everything has to be analyzed in terms of a holistic business model, both in terms not only short term of the return on investment you get, whether using deploying artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, robotics, or any other form of machine learning or others, but also then it is what are the long-term implications of using the technology, not only in terms of getting your return on investment, but again, impact, social impact on the society, how it would have the ethics. I think one of the great points which I heard is also the machine ethics, which has to be taken into account. So everything has to be analyzed holistically, not in silos, that whether it's just a jargon or it is a good technology which looks very good. But by the end of the day, it is all about your short term getting the profits and your business goals. But in the long term, of course, we have to make society more productive, more balanced. And I still believe that robotics or any technology is great, but by the end of the day, it is a combination of human intelligence, robotics, machine learning.
We seem to be losing Tariq there, unfortunately. Rick, please go ahead and share your insights as well. We'd love to hear from you on this topic.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank John for his question about empathetic robots. That's really such a fascinating concept. And I think we have to be prepared for the fact that these robots will become so intelligent that they can have things like empathy. In my own case, what I found out is that robots or computers have made my job easier because I, as a human, can focus on different things. Let the computers focus on the mechanics. Let me focus on being a human and a human experience. And that becomes a very, very valuable contribution that we're going to have. I really look forward to hearing more from Scott about how this is going to play out, how he thinks this is going to play out in a future where, for example, in the banking industry in Scandinavia, bots are replacing tech support people. You get online, you chat, you're not chatting with a human, you're chatting with a database, which is intelligently responding back. So if I could throw that question over to Scott, Alysia, that'd be really interesting to hear. How does he see that playing out?
Scott, do you want to answer that question quickly before we move on to our next question for Randall, Seth, and then Christian? Go for it, Scott.
Well, I think this is kind of the caliber of intellectual query and debate that I was expecting. So I'm so glad to hear from both of you. The point is, it is a combination of artificial or robotic computation plus human computation, meaning that just like we heard, I have seen research around the globe that is doing everything from computer vision for visual detection, emotions, facial, speech-based, to biometric, physiological. And the point is that these systems are going to, at some point, be able to empathize in some ways or fashion. Now, the question is, they can do some of it. So let's take the example of robo-advisors that can do finance for mass affluence. They can do some of that to an extent from a mass scale and mass personalization. But at some point, you need to hold on to somebody's hand and be able to look into somebody's eyes. That is not something that can be easily replicated by a machine. So when I say empathy model, it is allowing for the artificial systems to do what they do best, much like an airplane. And we act as the pilot that looks for notifications or deviations that the systems are alerting us and go deeper and be able to focus on facets that only humans can do. It's interesting, just on a side note, we're even experimenting with humor with AI. How do we start to develop humor aspects? So, but the point is, it's not about this or that. It is not a zero-sum game. It is of both. It's our AI computation plus human computation that makes for better experience.
Thank you, Scott. Absolutely brilliant insights being shared today. Moving on to our next question, we'd love to hear from Randall, Seth, and then Christian summing up for our community. Randall, what are some of the opportunities for entrepreneurs and business people, even large organizations that you're seeing in this space? Please go ahead. And then, of course, we'd love to hear from Seth and Christian.
You mean just broad opportunities?
Sure, go for it. Anything that hasn't been touched on that you believe our community should know about?
Well, a lot of innovation throughout the world, frankly, has come about in the defense and security space. Unfortunately, as humans, there's a long history of competition, which has led to to wars, or at least concern about defense. And I think that that area, and I'll also encompass entertainment as potentially leading some of the newest developments in robotics. And so we may be watching robots compete against themselves as a form of entertainment, and hopefully in a sense of defense, we'll be not putting as much human lives at risk.
Thank you, Randall. Seth, we'd love to hear from you here. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Alysia. One of the first things I wanted to comment, just to add on to some of the earlier points, you have something that we need to consider when we're talking about robots, and everybody is defaulting to how intelligent they're going to become, but they're forgetting machines or robots, whatever you want to call it, they don't have the EQ quotient that humans do. So you have IQ and EQ, emotional intelligence and intelligence. And until we can figure out how to program these to be lifelike, which we're in the middle of trying to do, I don't think you can really consider certain things. As far as jobs go and different areas to get into, one of the things we haven't really touched on is the sensing technology. And if you think about sensors, they're right now just one of the weakest points within all the entire Internet of Things and the entire infrastructure that we're talking about. Sensors right now are, very buggy in a lot of ways. They're not able, especially in IoT and wearables. Wearables is a great example where they're trying to right now overcome sort of that last mile hurdle, where you have a shirt that you have on that you're wearing to the gym that's supposed to be taking measurements of all sorts of things. Well, that's one of the hardest things in the world to actually accomplish if you think about it. Wearable technology, a garment that you're wearing into the gym that's going to go through a ton of friction while the person's working out, and then get a bunch of water and salt water from sweat that's been put onto it, and then thrown into the corner where it's going to get cold, and then thrown back into a washing machine. Those things wear out relatively quickly, and being able to have sensors that can withstand a lot of the elements. And if you look at deep sea deep sea mining, deep sea exploration, etc., the sensoring technology that's even used for oil drilling offshore, that's really where I see the next great wave. Sorry,
Thank you.
Alysia.
Not at all. Thank you, Seth. Christian, we'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of what Randall and Seth said. Some fascinating insights being shared by them. Please go ahead, Christian.
Well, I love the range that we've just covered in the last piece here. Some things to recap is robotics really brings together a lot of different technologies in a way that make their development very complex. We not only have materials and engineering, we have the need for things such as sensors as well as energy sources. Also, panelists touch on the fact that robots need not resemble humans as they do in the popular imagination. They can be very small, even small enough to fit inside someone's body, or they could be very large or oddly shaped to suit a task. And then as we usher in greater and greater applications of robotics, and especially as we potentially displace jobs, which will happen. There are millions of people who drive trucks in the US, for example. There needs to be some long-range planning at the individual level and the social level. Interesting questions around empathy came up, whether or not a robot could ever replace humans as an empathetic service worker, for example. And I would just say, an interesting thing I've seen here is a company that is designing robots as healthcare companions, not only to provide some mental health support, but also to deliver things such as medication. And the level of programming required to get a response, a positive response from a patient, is actually fairly low. And then on the more challenging side, some of the earliest applications of robotics have been in defense. And there are things that can be done when we combine all these things together, such as having very small robots operating autonomously in warfare that pose some very big ethical questions that probably need to be answered at a global level. And really cool, as Scott said, today we have a bunch of people from business and finance who are interested in that side of robotics, but are also very keen to talk about and work on the ethical side of ushering in robotics. So this is a fantastic discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Our next question goes to John and Tariq, and I know this is something you're both very passionate about. Hot topic right now, ICOs. Starting with you, John, are you seeing any robotics companies working with ICOs or other blockchain technologies you'd like to talk to our community about? Please go for it, John, and then we'd love to hear from you, Tariq.
Well, it's funny, because I probably get 10 or 20 emails or LinkedIn connections a day asking, do I invest in ICOs? And the answer is no. I invest in companies. Do you have one? Because an ICO doesn't imply you have a good business model. It doesn't imply you have any kind of business. Currently, we're looking at a raft of companies that are out there that are quote unquote not companies. They're foundations in Switzerland, which is complete bullcrap. But those companies are typically a few engineers with a lawyer who gave them bad advice. They don't have operations or finance or biz dev or any of that. So I'd be happy to invest in a robotics company. There's farm tech, there's security tech, there are drones, there are all these things that we talked about today. And I'm really keen on investing in all of those things. So if someone wants to do an ICO, just understand that an ICO is really just a way of creating a publicly tradable early stage company. And I believe that through the Jobs Act, you can do that legally. Don't base offshore, do it in the US, do it right. But the future for robotics is brilliant. It's wonderful. Whether it's regular venture capital or you do it through an ICO, I don't think it needs to be mutually exclusive one or the other. You're asking, can a robotics company raise money in an ICO space? Sure, but most haven't headed that way. They're still going towards the traditional venture capital route. But we think that making that legal and safe for investors, which is our goal, will change that.
Thank you, Scott. Tariq, we'd definitely love to hear your thoughts here too. Please go ahead. And then we'd like to hear from Seth. Please go ahead, Tariq.
Sure. I think very good thoughts here. Basically, it's all about business model and how good or robust the business model is. It doesn't matter whether the route is through the ICO or it is through the traditional venture capitalist money. I would like to give few comments on the ICOs, not in the context of robotics, but generally. The problem with most startups is that they build an excellent website, a fabulous white paper, and they go for ICOs, not realizing the practicalities of the business model, not even having MVPs in most cases. So that has become kind of a trend. So we really have to figure out that what is the true vitality of the business model, whether it's a robotics, definitely there is going to be some use of technologies and all these business models. So everything has to be analyzed as a company and all other indicators and parameters around which they are working on. Also, I believe that legal issues have become quite prominent, significant in terms of the ICOs, blockchain technologies, what different things are happening. It's a big trend. Nobody can really question that Bitcoin has become an alternative currency. But by the end of the day, it is all about putting everything in the legal part.
Thank you, Tariq. We seem to keep losing you there, unfortunately. Seth, we'd love to hear from you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So first of all, with the ICO market, what you need to do is you need to start to frame out some things that are really going to dictate, number one, who can go into it and how you go into it. We actually, my firm, we have invested heavily into a company that is in the space that actually has 800 of these lined up, but they're going to be 800 that get crowdsourced. First of all, the company has to be domiciled here in the US. And this is starting with the parameters. You need to be in business for at least 2 to 3 years. This is, in my mind, the way you got to do it. And then after 2 to 3 years, you need to be filing your taxes and be revenue producing. Not even revenue, cash flow positive, but you need to be able to, as Tariq was trying to say, I think up front, be at an MVP stage at an absolute minimum. Going into a marketplace to raise money to build out a concept or an idea or a dream reminds me way too much of the .com era and how people were creating things that just had no bearing even being in the market. And I don't think we can get into a place with ICOs until we take a more pragmatic look and say, what is it that these tools should be used for within the marketplace? And in my mind, it's nothing more than in between, almost like mezzanine round between like seed and A, complement to things.
Moving on to our next question, which we're posing for Scott and Rick, and then we'd love to hear from our other VIPs as well. Scott, some have suggested that Alphabet, parent company of Google, has had some challenges monetizing their robotics acquisitions and investments. In your opinion, is this the case? And is it a general phenomenon in the industry? We'd love to hear from you, and then we'd love to hear from Rick. Please go ahead, Scott.
That's an interesting question. If you're familiar with the story, you know that Google had acquired Boston Dynamics, so things like Wildcat and their latest humanoid Atlas. The issue around their divestiture around Boston Dynamics was less about monetization and more about creepiness. I think they themselves felt that it was starting to go kind of beyond the scope of doing business for good. So there is definitely that. In terms of monetization, the biggest markets that we're seeing, of course, is industrial. With the fourth industrial revolution as these become more cognitively aware, and then into the homes. And of course, the car itself is actually a major robot, in particular autonomous vehicles level 5. So that is definitely happening. Now, with that said, from an investor perspective, it is actually very difficult. If you listen to Professor Rodney Brooks of MIT, who is the former CEO and CTO of Rethink Robotics, as well as the iRobotic Corp, he will tell you that building a robotics company and monetizing is actually very difficult. It's a long-term investment, and it's a difficult endeavor. Now, with that said, of course, you have accelerators like PCH, Hex, Alchemist, Hardware Co, RGA, and others that are making it easier. And you have open source such as ROS, Robot Operating Systems, that provides tools, libraries to even foundations like the Open Source Robotics Foundation. It is still nonetheless a very expensive endeavor. So if you think about kind of the latest project, such as MIT's Valkyrie robot that's going to be participating in NASA space missions, it's expensive. And it really takes DARPA and military and government dollars to invest in some of the earlier research before it can start to be commercialized out. So I think from a VC perspective, we're very cautious, optimistic, but very cautious. But one of the bright areas we think is going to be around the healthcare and clinical and life sciences, such as nanobots that's within the bloodstream for cancer detection, as an example.
Thank you, Scott. Rick, we'd love to hear from you here. Please go ahead and share your thoughts.
Thank you, Scott. Really, really interesting. As I was sitting here listening to you, I was reminded, because we're talking about monetizing, I was reminded about how entrepreneurs work and how entrepreneurs, they go out and they find a problem, and then they find a simple way to solve the problem. That's entrepreneurship at its core. A few years ago, I was in Copenhagen, and I went to the Lego company, and they had an exhibition. They had a number of 10-year-olds who had been given these incredibly complex techno-Lego setups. And these 10-year-olds had come up with some of the most amazing innovations, things you never would have thought about. And yet they found ways of automating and turning these robotic toys into useful functions. And I was sitting here wondering, what are the things that we are completely blind to today, problems that we struggle with as humans that won't even, 10 years from now, we'll look back and we'll laugh that we didn't see that even coming. I'm really curious, what do you guys think is coming down the pike?
Thank you, Rick, and hopefully your co-panelists will answer that as part of our next question. So our next question goes to Randall, Seth, John, and of course, we'd love for you to sum it up, Christian. So starting with you, Randall, if you could change one thing about the industry, what would it be?
I'll address maybe the financial profitability motives, and it has to do with business models. I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs or technology developers creating interesting things for interesting things' sake without actually a route to profitability, or at least a means of providing a return to the investors. So, I'd like to better, I'll say, combine the financial mentality and wherewithal of the technology developers with profit-producing motives. Because unless it's true R&D, governmental support, progress really gets driven by the need to make money.
Thank you, Randall. Seth, we'd love to hear from you as well.
The one thing I'd actually change is I'm looking at this panel today, and everybody here is super qualified, but we have no women. And I don't think there's enough women or diversity within this industry or within the sector as a whole, whether it's the financing side or whether it's the technology side. And I think that really starts with having to encourage little girls to actually get into STEM. And STEM is one of the biggest areas, I think, for innovation, obviously science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that's really, I think, what we really need to be doing, because I think the perspectives and the dynamic that would add would be completely different.
Thank you very much for that answer. John, we'd love to hear from you. And then Christian, of course, you. Please go ahead, John.
And so the question is, again, what do I think should change, or should you restate?
Yes, exactly. What's the one thing you change about the industry if you're given the opportunity to?
I don't really know. I mean, I think the industry is doing amazingly well. It's Internet of Things and devices in the field, and just all of the ideas that are coming along. I mean, we could hope that it gets more funding, but, you know, as Seth was saying, wanting to see a couple of years of this or that, you know, if it's not a social site and you're not just building it on eyeballs and going to make your money with ads, then you're going to need to have something there. I guess the one thing, I mean, I really can't find anything except perhaps the entrepreneurs themselves understanding that if they want to get ahead and if they want to get capital, the ICO craze is a white paper, but the traditional model is, you know, even with a deck and the rest, I want to see your P&L. I want to see your pro forma. I don't care about flash, sizzle, and smell. I want to cut the steak open and look inside. So I agree that entrepreneurs, and I'm not sure that this is a change, I just think that if entrepreneurs want to fulfill their dreams, they have to get capital. And if you're going to get capital, focus on the profit. When are you going to start making money? When is the rubber going to hit the road? Sorry, I can't give you a better thing than that. I like where the whole industry is heading.
Very good advice. Christian, just to quickly sum up for our community before we move on to our next question, please go ahead.
My pleasure. Another set of hot topics. So we started out with ICOs, which is an abbreviation for initial coin offering, which is a new form of financing of venture. ICOs have attracted a lot of speculative attention, where groups are raising money that may not have underlying companies. And even more important, those companies may not be solving a significant business problem such that they could generate the returns that one would expect from an investment opportunity. And many of the investors on this conversation are receiving inquiries from companies that are leading with the announcement that they are having an ICO, but not talking about the underlying business or what the problem the business is solving is. This actually relates to what we may see in robotics, in the sense that if companies are engaged in creating tools and platforms, but not directing their research and product development towards solving specific problems, such as performing surgery or cleaning in dangerous situations, that may make it difficult for investors to put money into the companies, and it may make it difficult for companies to continue development. So there's often something we see in the technology investing arena where tool sets are much more difficult to sustain and derive revenue and profits from. And then the question of diversity. And I think that's an especially important question in the field like this, because different perspectives will change how we answer the really big ethical questions about this. And we are seeing some companies make a big effort. Alysia arranged for us to visit Google X, and there were a lot of perspectives represented at Google X. So companies are also recognizing the need to bring diversity into these fields, because it will change how we answer the really big questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And now our favorite part of every week's show, we're going to ask our VIPs, what excites you in 2018 and what industries do you believe are ripe for disruption? And we're going to fly through the panel. Please tell us the first thing that pops into your mind. You are all the best in the business. We're here to learn from you, so please be 100% honest. First person that we are putting on the spot is Scott. Scott, please go for it. What excites you in 2018? What industries are ripe for disruption?
I think it's going to be retail. So after Christmas, we're going to see lots of companies on the bankruptcy list, in addition to the 22 that's on the Moody's list. And many CEOs will be pushed out. We think that this is a great time to really transform how we define retail and experiences, and make sure that we have the right sets of KPIs moving forward. A lot of this is going to be around experiences and making sure that there is clarity around how do you drive experiences through new forms of exponential technologies.
Thank you, Scott. Seth, what excites you in 2018 and what industries are ripe for disruption?
That's a great question. And yeah, I would agree a little bit with Scott's comment on retail, but I would also say, look at real estate. It's the last bastion of financial that really nothing has been done. They still have such a kludge of a transaction to get completed that I really see technologies that are coming to the forefront, whether it's it's typically mostly software, but real estate would be my answer.
Thank you. Randall, we'd love to hear from you. What excites you in 2018? What industries are ripe for disruption?
Sure. To me, what's really interesting and ripe is the fast food production industry. This is a highly repetitive, large-scale business, and still involves a lot of human labor. And I think there'll be tremendous amounts of automation, robots, et cetera, cooking food, delivering food, processing payments, et cetera. And we'll see fewer and fewer people in those large-scale, big box, small box retail food establishments.
Thank you, Randall. Rick, we'd love to hear from you. What excites you in 2018? What industries are ripe for disruption?
Well, thank you, Alysia. There's so much that excites me in 2018, but I'm particularly looking forward to the battle between Alexa and Siri and Google Home. And as we begin to kind of incorporate these things into our homes and into our lives, into our business processes, I think it's going to be a blast. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you, Rick. Tariq, I hope you're with us. Tariq, please share with us what excites you in 2018, what industries are ripe for disruption.
Right. So with some background in fintech, I believe that insurance industry is really ripe for disruption at this stage, in particular the medical and auto industry. So insurtech has a lot of potential because of the suboptimal way as the back-end operations of these insurance companies are being run these days. And also it will solve a lot of medical issues and medical health and some of those because of the demographics, aging demographics, especially in North America. So that is what my take is.
Thank you, Tariq. Christian, we'd love to hear from you quickly on the subject. Please go for it.
Very excited about new forms of financing, creating greater financial access and making it easier to get transactions done. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Now we're going to ask our VIPs to prepare their tweet piece of advice quickly that we can all go and apply to our businesses and become as smart as they are when it comes to robots and robotics. While they do that, thank you to everyone for a truly amazing session and to our VIPs for joining us today. Just to keep you posted on our upcoming sessions with some of the world's best joining us again as VIPs. On October 23rd, we've got a very cool session called Health Tech and Health Innovation, New Innovation, Shifting Boundaries and Changing World Health. On November 1st, Smart Cities and Transportation, What does the Future Hold? Remember to keep us up to date on all your exciting news. We love hearing from you. And you can always email us, inspire me at onlinefiresidechat.com. You can find me as well as our VIPs on LinkedIn. Don't forget, if you enjoyed today's session, make sure to share the invite because we're trying to reach our 100-country goal. And we love learning from the best, and they give us their time, and this is the way we thank them. So now we're going to quickly run through our VIPs, ask them to share their tweet piece of advice, starting with Seth. Seth, please share with us.
I guess the best piece of advice is just stick with it. You know, a lot of people like to give up, and it isn't about, you know, how much success and how much money you're going to make. It's sort of the journey. And I think you really got to look at this as more of where you're going to get out of it. It's not going to be just about financial gain. It's also about the knowledge base. And I think too many people are too quick to give up on really good ideas that could become great ideas. And I don't think they give enough thought to how they get into the process in the first place. And I think putting together a really solid plan ahead of time would probably short circuit some of the problems these people have by quitting.
Thank you, Seth. Scott, your tweet piece of advice.
Yes, it has to do with IP. There is tremendous research that's happening at universities and research institutions. It is not being commercialized. We need to shift from being innovators to being inventors. Exponential technology requires a leapfrog and not a copycat. As I travel the world, I can tell you that most startups are still doing copycats and superficial startups. We need to make investments. The other part is around sales and marketing. Without a actual industry backing a consortium where startups can have test pilots or test beds, it becomes very problematic. That is one of the biggest issues around commercialization and monetization, is making sure there is cooperation among industries to allow for startups to participate and to showcase their technologies.
Thank you. John, we'd love to have your quick tweet piece of advice. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, so please keep it short.
Yeah, well, just put out real companies. ICOs, what they term, it's not my term, shit coins, they're going away. The Swiss model of not being a company, going away. If you want to be in the ICO market and the coin market going forward, you have to be either a security or a commodity and follow those rules.
Thank you, John. Randall, your quick tweet piece of advice.
Sure, I get the best ideas when I take a subject like robotics and ask a completely non-obvious person what their thoughts are on it. So I might ask my lawn maintenance person or the bank teller, how are they using robots or thinking about robots, and really digesting those kind of ideas.
Thank you, Randall. Rick, your quick tweet piece of advice.
Sure. I think rather than focusing on humans versus robots, I think I want to focus on how humans plus robots will free us up and allow us to be even more human. And what are we really going to use that for? So I look forward to a really amazing future with robotics as helpers.
Very inspiring words of advice. Tariq, your tweet piece of advice.
Yes, when you think of robotics or deploying robots in your business model, just think that is it solving a real compelling problem, or it is just a good to have problem?
Thank you, Tariq. And last but not least, Christian, your tweet piece of advice.
As with everything, focus on the business fundamentals and solving large problems.
Thank you, Christian. My tweet piece of advice: we are all still humans and we haven't turned into robots. So thank you to all of you for joining us today. We are very privileged to be entrepreneurs. We should never take this for granted. And we should be grateful for all these amazing opportunities and to learn from the best. Thank you to everyone for a very, very, very special session. Remember to keep us up to date and to keep hustling and to never give up. I'm sure our VIPs would agree with that statement. On the count of 3, we're going to ask everyone to say bye. So 1, 2, 3. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.